Most people aren't actually afraid of failure. They're afraid of looking like someone who failed. There's a difference. Failing in private, most of us can live with that. But failing where other people can see it, that's the one that keeps us frozen. So we tell ourselves we'll start when we're more prepared. We'll apply after one more course, speak up after we're more confident, launch after everything's perfect. It sounds responsible. It sounds smart. Sometimes it even sounds humble. But underneath it, it's usually just fear, disguised as patience. Because if you never really go for it, you never really have to find out. And that's its own kind of comfort. The comfort of never being embarrassed. The comfort of never being rejected. The comfort of never discovering what you're actually capable of. We think avoiding big failures protects our confidence. It usually does the opposite. Because every day you don't try, your imagination fills in the blanks. The interview would have gone terribly. The business would have failed. The conversation would have been awkward. The book would have been terrible. Your mind becomes incredibly confident about things it has absolutely no evidence for. It writes stories, not memories. And stories are almost always scarier. That's why something happens as we get older. We become experts at creating lives that are almost impossible to criticize because they're almost impossible to notice. Safe jobs, safe opinions, safe ambitions, just enough effort to feel responsible. Not enough to risk disappointment. It's a clever strategy until you realize something. A life with no spectacular failures usually comes with no spectacular surprises either. One story cuts through that better than any explanation could. Actor Denzel Washington once told a college graduation audience about an audition early in his career, not for a dramatic role, but for a Broadway musical, which sounds exciting until you hear one important detail. He couldn't sing. Imagine saying yes to that, not secretly hoping nobody notices, walking into the room fully aware you were missing the skill everyone else probably expects you to have. He auditioned anyway, and it went exactly how you'd expect. He bombed, didn't get the part. No miracle ending, no standing ovation, no producer pulling him aside to say they saw a hidden potential. Just failure. The kind that's clear. The kind you don't need anyone to explain. Most of us hear a story like that and think, well, at least he still made it big, so the failure doesn't really matter. But it matters for the opposite reason. Because in that moment, making it big hadn't happened yet. He wasn't Denzel Washington. He was just another person who walked into a room and found out they weren't ready. That's a much more familiar story. We love talking about confidence as if it's something you bring with you. But confidence rarely shows up first. Evidence does. And sometimes the first piece of evidence isn't success, it's survival. You survive the awkward presentation. You survive the rejection email. You survive the business that nobody buys from. You survive saying something that doesn't land. You survive looking inexperienced. Then something unexpected happens. Your fear loses one of its favorite arguments because it kept insisting, if this goes badly, it'll be unbearable. Then it goes badly, and somehow you keep making dinner. You still laugh at a joke. You wake up the next morning. Life doesn't collapse. Failure turns out to be uncomfortable, embarrassing, frustrating, but not fatal. That's a discovery you can never make from the sidelines, only from the arena. That audition wasn't about singing at all. It didn't teach Denzel how to sing. It taught him something much harder to learn. Entering the room is a decision. Winning was never his to control. Most people wait for a guarantee they can't actually give themselves. I'll go if I think I'll succeed. But what if the real decision is much simpler? I'll go because that's where reality is. Because outside the room, everything is imagination. Inside the room, you finally get evidence. Maybe good evidence, maybe painful evidence. Either way, it's real. And reality has something imagination never will. It lets you move, because once something has actually happened, you finally know what you're dealing with. Not the fantasy version and not the nightmare version, the real one. Years later, Denzel came back to that exact same theater, not to audition, to star in a hit play. It's a satisfying ending, but maybe not for the reason we usually think. We like to imagine life keeping score, as if the universe looked back at that first audition and said, "You've earned your redemption." Life doesn't really work that way. The theater didn't owe him anything. It wasn't paying back an old debt. It just happened to be the place where someone who refused to stop eventually arrived. That's different. Because if he'd walked out after that failed audition thinking, well, I guess that settles it, there would have been nothing to come back to. Not because he lacked talent, because he'd accepted one moment as a permanent description of himself. We do that all the time. One awkward date, I'm bad at relationships. One failed business, I'm just not entrepreneurial. One difficult conversation, I'm terrible with people. It's amazing how quickly we turn an event into an identity. But failure doesn't actually say this is who you are. It says this is what happened. That's all. Everything after that, that's interpretation. And interpretations are surprisingly flexible. Think about someone's first day in a beginner's cooking class. Nobody expects them to plate a 5-course tasting menu. The teacher expects burnt garlic, a sauce that's lumpy, rice that turns to mush. None of that is evidence they can't cook. It's evidence they just started. Somewhere along the way, we quietly changed the rules. As adults, we expect ourselves to skip that part. We want first attempts that already look experienced. We expect confidence before repetition, competence before embarrassment. It's backwards. The embarrassment usually comes first, then the competence sneaks in while you're busy recovering from it. And that's why failure has such an unfair reputation. We treat it like it's the opposite of progress. Sometimes it's the evidence. proof that progress actually happened. If nothing ever goes wrong, it might not mean you're exceptionally gifted. It might just mean you've become exceptionally careful. Careful about where you apply. Careful about what you attempt. Careful about what dreams you're willing to admit you have. But the dreams you won't admit to don't just disappear. They keep growing quietly in the background. Eventually, your comfort zone starts feeling smaller. Not because it shrank, because what you actually want got bigger. You outgrew it. Your comfort zone doesn't feel comfortable anymore. It feels repetitive, predictable, almost like moving back into your first apartment. You can still squeeze your life into it, but everything about it feels too small for who you are now. That's why taking a risk isn't really about chasing excitement. It's about finding out things about yourself that playing it safe can't tell you. Some of it won't impress you. Some of it will surprise you. But at least it's real. There's something you'll only learn from the conversation you keep avoiding. Something you'll only learn from the rejection you actually get. Something you'll only learn from the project that completely flops. You don't get any of it by thinking harder, only by showing up. Denzel's story isn't really about the failed audition or the standing ovations that came later. It's about the decision in between, the quiet one, the one nobody applauds, the choice to come back tomorrow, to risk looking inexperienced again, to let one bad day stay exactly that, one bad day, nothing more. Because the goal was never to avoid failing big. The goal was to become someone who can survive failing big without shrinking your life afterward. Because once you know you can survive it, you stop negotiating with fear quite so much. You stop waiting for certainty. You stop asking whether you'll win, and you start asking a better question. Is this worth finding out? It won't promise you'll win, but it gets you moving. If you'd like to keep exploring conversations like these, every week inside my school community, we take one personal development idea and actually live with it for a week. We compare notes, discover what worked, what surprised us, and what none of us would have seen on our own. You'll find the link to join us in the video description. And before you go, please share this video with someone who's been having this same conversation with themselves. I'll see you in the next one.